My name is Barb Tuwaki, and I'm the Executive Director of the Children's Defense Fund of Minnesota. CDF, yeah! CDF is proud to be one of 3 co-chairs of the Minnesotans for Paid Family Leave, along with Minnesota, AFL-CIO, and Isaiah. Minnesotans for Paid Family Leave is a coalition of faith, labor, and nonprofit communities representing nearly 1 million Minnesotans, including children, parents, grandparents, workers, and business owners. In addition to CDF, Isaiah, and the AFL-CIO, we have coalition members here today from MAPE, AARP, the Coalition for Women's Economic Security, Take Action, Gender Justice, UFCW Local 189, SEIU, Main Street Alliance, AFSCME Council 5, the Minnesota Nurses Association, and many, many more. Welcome, everyone. We are all here today because we all have a story. We all need or may have needed in the past or know someone who needs paid family and medical leave, whether it's for the addition of a new child to the family or to care for a seriously ill parent or grandparent near the end of life.
That's right.
The United States is one of 3 countries that doesn't require paid leave. The end result is that a broken system that favors a lucky few while leaving thousands of Minnesotans behind, especially low-income workers, particularly women and people of color.
That's not right.
We believe that Minnesotans should be able to work and care for themselves and their families. And we know that paid family medical leave insurance program is a fair, common sense solution that would allow people to do both.
That's right.
We are so proud of the progress we have made these past 2 years because of this coalition and because of our allies and champions at the Capitol, some of whom we're going to hear from later today in the program, including Governor Mark Dayton, Lieutenant Governor Tina Flynn-Smith, Senator Katie Stephen, Representative Tupac Nessa, Representative Peggy Flanagan, Senator Rod Stowe, and others, including Majority Leader Tom Bach. We passed paid family medical leave legislation through the Senate just last week, and that was a huge victory. Everybody! But our work isn't done yet.
That's right.
And that is why we are here today. Today, we will be sharing the stories of Minnesotans that inspire all of us to fight for paid family medical leave. We will present letters to Governor Dayton and Majority Leader Bach to continue to make this issue a priority as they move into final negotiations. And we will call on the Minnesota House to follow the Senate's lead and take action on this crisis facing Minnesota families. Before we dive into the program, let me first welcome Minnesota AFL-CIO President Bill McCarthy. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Marty. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to your capital to be a voice for working families across Minnesota. The Minnesota AFL-CIO and our affiliate unions are proud to be a part of this coalition. We're co-chairing this coalition because all working people, regardless of whether they belong to a union, should have access to paid family leave. Everyone should have the ability to take care of a sick family member without worrying about paying the bills. Every parent should have the opportunity to take time off with pay to bond with a new child. That's why we're here today, to ask Speaker Dowd to support and pass paid family leave legislation this year. The governor supports paid family leave. The Senate supports paid family leave. Now is the time for the House majority to stand with working families and support this legislation. Now is the time to act.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Elstra. I'm a complaint investigator at Minnesota Department of Education. I'm also a proud member of the Minnesota Association of Professional Employees. My wife, Sarah, and I have a 9-month-old son named August, who we call Gus. Even before I got pregnant, we started talking about my maternity leave and how we would manage the financial hit of me being out of work without pay. I started saving vacation and sick time, and we started saving money too. I became pregnant, and then, right at the start of my second trimester, Sarah got sick. She got a rare form of pneumonia and spent several weeks in the hospital in the intensive care unit, and several more weeks recovering at home, needing round-the-clock care. I knew that I was going to need to be home with my new baby after I delivered, and so I worked while my wife was on a ventilator. And in addition to worrying about her, I worried about money and work and how much sick time I was going to have to be able to stay home and take care of my new baby. No one should have to do that. And if we had had paid family leave, I wouldn't have had to. When Gus was born, I was able to take 12 weeks FMLA, but it was very stressful for us financially. We couldn't manage to have Sarah out unpaid as well, so she went back to work after 2 weeks. She was heartbroken to have to leave her newborn son home and go back to work so soon, and it was very stressful for all of us to make that adjustment so quickly. We would really have benefited from having Sarah home longer. Paid family leave is one way that we can support families and help them get through those early weeks that are so incredibly sweet and so unbelievably hard. A few months ago, Sarah, Gus, and I met with our Senator, Jeff Hayden, to talk about why paid family leave is so important to us. He agreed, and he voted in favor of the legislation last week. We're so pleased that Governor Dayton and Lieutenant Governor Smith are able to join us today. On behalf of my family and the Minnesotans for Paid Family Leave Coalition, I'd like to invite them to the podium to thank them for their support. I'd also like to thank them for their support of May's Paid Parental Leave campaign. We encourage you to champion a strong paid family leave bill this session and address the crowd.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. That says it all right there. Why this legislation is so very important to Minnesotans, to Minnesota families. And I thank you. And I'm sorry you had to go through that kind of hardship. In this day and age in Minnesota, we should be more enlightened than that. I want to thank the co-sponsors of this, the Children's Defense Fund, the Minnesota AFL-CIO, and Isaiah for their courageous leadership. Bringing together the moral authority of the church and the authority of all the political leaders who are here. I want to thank Senator Bach, Senate Majority Leader, for championing this bill through the Minnesota Senate. And the Senate author, Senator Katie Stevens, did a phenomenal job of bringing this. Representative Jason Metzler, Representative Peggy Flanagan, the co-sponsors of the House legislation. For yourselves, all the other legislators are here, and my partner in all of this, Lieutenant Governor Tina Smith, who's just been a true champion of all of this as well, and was instrumental in getting the paid parental leave up to a higher level over some old guy like me. But so he's been a true champion as well. So with everybody gathered here together, all of this incredible support. All we need is for the leadership of the Minnesota House to recognize what all of us do, which is this is a moral responsibility. This is really a measure of the moral integrity of the state of Minnesota. I'm proud to support this, and I'm proud to stand with Lieutenant Governor Smith. I'm just going to say, for the sake of the press, I'm not going to comment. This attention should be here. We have a target setting meeting after that. Will be available to the press after that, but I'm not going to comment here. So I want the press to be encouraged to stay here and cover this really important event.
Thank you, Governor. Well, in addition to all of the incredible leadership
leadership that you see gathered before you today, political leadership and faith leadership and labor leadership, I want to thank the moms and dads and brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews that every single day in Minnesota figure out how to take care of their loved ones, because that is just what we do. That is what we do. The thing is, we make it so hard sometimes, and it does not need to be that hard. We see examples of how this can be done all across the country and all across the world, and Minnesota is good enough to figure out how to make sure that moms and dads and mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers don't have to choose between their paycheck and taking care of their loved ones.
I'm a daughter, sister, mother, grandmother. I've been caregiver for many of my family members, including my parents, my brother, my children, and my grandchildren. I came here today from Rochester to tell you about my family and my experiences as a family caregiver. As a family caregiver, I've done a multitude of day-to-day tasks, like helping around the house, arranging for Meals on Wheels, and driving to or arranging transportation to appointments. Typical caregiving activities. It may be surprising to some that I've also provided much more complex care, including medication management, injections, and managing chemotherapy treatments. Does this sound like someone who needs paid family leave? Yes! My son was diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease at the age of 16. At one time, he took 22 pills a day. He's now 30 and still struggling with this disease. As a mom, I wouldn't be anywhere else but by his side when he needs help. My dad has end-stage lung and heart disease. He's oxygen dependent. My mom is currently undergoing chemotherapy treatments for lymphoma. My parents have had multiple visits to the emergency room, hospitalizations, and placements in skilled nursing facilities. Does this sound like someone who needs paid family leave? Yeah. Can you relate to this? Do you know others who are going through all of this? Yes. With my parents' health starting to decline, I became guardian for my developmentally disabled brother. He has very complex medical issues and requires extensive care. For me, caregiving is a full-time job. Working as a social worker, I hear from other caregivers with similar experiences. My employer does offer paid time off for their employees, which I'm grateful for. However, the paid time off I'm offered is not nearly as generous as the proposed program currently before the Minnesota legislators. I am so willing to contribute a little out of my paycheck. The value of families' emotional support and presence during a loved one's illness cannot be measured. People should not fear financial difficulty. Let's pass the Paid Family Leave Act. I'd like to thank Senate Majority Leader Tom Box for making paid family leave a priority.
Thank you to all of you who have made the DFL Senate's action possible. This really is the perfect example of grassroots democracy, where issues come up from our communities and people advocate and they come to the Capitol. And I want to thank Representative Metza and especially my friend Senator Sieben for the tireless advocates that they've been for this paid family leave bill. Back on February 6th, it was a Saturday, we had an all-day caucus of the Democratic members of the Senate. And we all, on a little post-it note, put our priorities down. All 39 of us. And when the cloud was developed about what the Senate's priorities were going to be going into this legislative session, paid family leave made the list of 3. And I'm disappointed we haven't been able to find Republican support along the way. You know, I was lucky growing up as a kid, 62 years ago. Life was different. And a lot of families had only one working spouse in a family, and oftentimes one would stay home. And Economically, they could make that work back then. But for most families now, that's more and more difficult. And so I was fortunate. I had a stay-at-home mom that only worked at home. But most families can't do that. And when my parents started aging and my dad needed to go have eye surgery, when my mother needed a new hip, when my mother needed back surgery at the Mayo Clinic, I had the kind of job where I could take time off and make sure that their needs were taken care of. And I tell you what worries me is, and I see a few baby boomers in the audience, there are 10,000 people turning 65 every single day. This is about more than just mothers with babies. 10,000 people every day turn 65, and it's going to be that way for the next 20 years. There is going to be tremendous stress on families to care for this baby boom generation of aging parents. And they're going to have the kind of workplaces that allow them to be able to do that. And I'll tell you this, early on this session when we rolled out the Senate's priorities, we had a whole list of things we thought were important for Minnesota's future. And I said at a press conference, you know, we might not get everything on this list this year, but I tell you what these priorities are going to show. It is going to show where the DFL Senate is going. And this is one of them if we don't accomplish it this year. If we don't get it this year, the DFL Senate will be back next year, and we need your help to continue advocating, to keep educating people. And then the other side of me being a rural person. You know, most of you that know rural towns know that we're really struggling economically. And I think as this labor shortage gets tighter and tighter and tighter, the businesses that are going to have the access to the best talent are those that are able to offer the best benefit set, and that's where people are going to want to flow. So, you know, I see it in my own family. My daughter-in-law, when she had both of my grandchildren, her employer gave her 12 weeks off paid in Minnesota. My daughter is pregnant right now and due in July. And her employer, who has people in Minnesota, is going to give her 14 weeks off paid. So this is an issue whose time has come. The business community knows it. That's why they're starting to offer those benefits, that they understand that in this increasingly tight labor market, it's the businesses that care for the needs of their workers' families that are going to be successful and have the best talent going forward. And that's especially true in rural Minnesota because we don't want, when we're getting kind of tired of educating our kids, and our biggest export being sending them to the big employers that are able to offer these kind of benefits. So in rural Minnesota, our employers are going to need this kind of a program because they probably aren't big enough to do it on their own. They're going to need, you know, kind of like the U in union means you, they're going to need us all to pool as employees and employers in this state so that even the small employers and the businesses that aren't really profitable are going to be able to attract the kind of workforce that they need to be successful. So thank you all very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Katie Sieben, a senator from Cottage Grove. Before he gets back to session, I just personally want to thank Majority Leader Bach. It's largely because of his leadership and Tax Chair Rod Skoy's leadership that the Senate was able to pass paid family leave this year, and we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. Each of you has a story. As we heard throughout the legislative debate over passing this bill through the Minnesota Senate, we heard from so many of you, advocates who took time to come to the Capitol to talk about how difficult it was to go back to work after a premature baby was born, and what happened when they only had limited time off, and what they did after that baby was too young to go to a licensed daycare center, and how they had to patch together different family members to take care of a baby so they could go back to work. We heard from middle-aged people who talked about how difficult it was to take care of their elderly parents who were dying. We heard from younger people who talked about wanting to have a larger family, but had difficulty because they didn't have the economic resources to be able to do that, or weren't sure how they were going to piece together the weeks they knew they would need after a new baby was born. It's because all of you were willing to share your personal stories that we made progress in the Minnesota Senate this session. And it's because of all of you that we're going to take our stories to the state capitol, to the Minnesota House of Representatives, and encourage Speaker Dowd and Majority Leader Pepin to seriously consider how we're going to cross the finish line this session and get paid family leave enacted into law. Governor Dayton and Lieutenant Governor Tina Smith have been tremendous advocates and have talked about the importance of passing this legislation. Our great House colleagues here, Representative Flanagan and Representative Metza, have been tremendous advocates in the House, but have been unable to convince the House majority that the time to act is now. We need to pull together. We need to talk to our friends and our neighbors and our colleagues, share our individual stories. When I had my third child, I was a state senator a couple of years ago. Back to work a week after my daughter Greta was born. I had the economic resources. I was still paid to be a senator. Most Minnesotans not only don't get that pay now, but they also don't have the security to be able to have that additional time off. So we need to work really hard to advocate for this and get this over the line these last few days. Just like education is a top priority this session, just like transportation investments are a top priority, paid family leave is a top priority for the Minnesota Senate, and we need to get it done. Thank you very much.
It'd be terrible if I didn't get up and say, Katie, you left out yourself. Yeah, the group in the Senate that made this happen, and I think on behalf of all of Minnesota, 85% of Minnesotans who support this language, thank you for your efforts. So we heard a lot today about the great things that this can do. Representative Flanagan and I have had this bill in since the beginning of session. We've requested hearings, and we haven't gotten any. Representative Anderson, Sarah Anderson in the House, had said to the press early on in the session that she was going to put out a paid family leave bill that worked for Minnesotans. And what did we get? Tax credits. So if you're a young mother working 2-3 jobs, young father, what good is a tax credit if you aren't making money? So at the end of the day, I really appreciate everyone coming out here, and like Senator Bach had stated, we might not win this fight this year, but we're sure as heck going to find out if we are going to lose this week, because we can go in that building right after this and the rest of the week and knock every single GOP door. Let Speaker Dowd know that this is a priority that doesn't have a Democrat when you're going to visit your grandmother at the nursing home or your mother. You don't wear a Democrat pin or a Republican. Well, maybe you do to get them riled up or something. But this is a family issue. This is about taking care of your neighbors. This is the state that I was raised in. I'm here because I was able and fortunate enough to take care of my grandfather and both my grandfathers, I have taken care of my dad in the hospital, the same stories that your families have. And it's time that we set the bar a little higher in this state. We've heard a lot from the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce and their friends. We've got great Fortune 500 companies in this state that provide good paying jobs. That's right. And you want to know what? If they're operating in Europe, they provide paid family leave to their there, but not to the people in their home state that make them the strong companies they are. So this is about setting the tone in the final days of this session that we're going to go out and leave no stone unturned in passing this legislation. Are y'all going to help with that? Yeah! That wasn't loud enough. Let me hear one more time. Are y'all going to help with that? Good. Let's turn it over to Representative Flanagan. Thank you all for coming.
Good afternoon. My name is Peggy Flanagan, and I'm one of the new guys around this joint. This is my first legislative session, and let me tell you, I came in excited and ready to work, and I'm feeling a little deflated. Because, you know, I came in here, my identity as a mom, as a daughter, and as a child advocate. And I am dismayed by the lack of movement and commitment to children and families in the Minnesota House. And I am so grateful to the leadership of Senator Sieben, Majority Leader Bach, as well as my partner in justice, Representative Metza, and Governor Dayton and Lieutenant Governor Tina Smith, and all of our colleagues who are here who believe in this. But somehow it's not enough. And we need to ensure that we are calling on Speaker Dowd and on House leadership to let folks know that this is a priority. That this is a priority for Minnesotans. This last summer, I was in my community, and I was coming out of a meeting, and I saw a guy up on a ladder painting a window. And all of a sudden I heard a baby cry. And so, especially for those of you who are moms, you hear a baby cry and there's this thing instantly. You're like, where's it coming from? And I turned around and I watched this guy get off of a ladder and go up to a minivan that had both doors open. And there was an infant in the back seat that he picked up and calmed down and then put back in the car seat. And this infant was probably about 3 weeks old. And I said, hey, and he got a little afraid, and I was like, you're not in trouble. Just, what's going on? And he said that his wife had to go back to work the day after giving birth. And as someone who benefited from an employer, they gave me 12 weeks of paid leave, and I knew how important that time was to bond with my child and just to figure out how to be a mom. My heart broke, and it continues to break day after day as we are denying care for children and families in this state, and it's not okay. And it is not who we are as Minnesotans. And so, 85% of folks in this state believe in paid family leave. Republicans, Democrats, Independents. So we know that this is a priority for Minnesota's families, Minnesota's working families, and we need to yell just a little bit louder to make sure that House leadership knows that this is important to you. It is important to me. I am begging you, as a mom, as a lawmaker, as a Minnesotan, to call Speaker Dowd, to call House leadership and let them know that as a Minnesotan, you value paid family leave, and it is time, because the development of a child, right, weeks, months, we can't wait any longer. When you're caring for a sick adult, those moments spent together mean so much, and frankly, we should have more. So thank you for turning out, and let's make sure that all voices are heard to let these folks know that Minnesotans need and deserve paid family leave. Thank you.
Pastor Matt Versago from Crown of Glory Lutheran Church in Chaska, the southwest part of town. And I'm not here on my own. I'm here on behalf of over 200 pastors who have been part of actions and endeavors that Isaiah has taken on. We are speaking together, and we are delighted. And who can give those moments back? When you said, I mean, who can give the moments back when somebody first brings their child home? Can anybody? Who will give it back? I mean, who gives you the moments back when you're near your parent who is dying? This last year, my parents died within a month of each other. And they were both at hospice at the same time. And I think of the conversations. I didn't take and have paid family leave. And dutiful and hardworking, and I pride myself in doing that, but I think of the conversations I could have had. You know, I think of the things we confess to each other. I think of the way that people try to reconcile life. At the end of their life, there is no more precious gift than you can give to somebody else than to somehow hear their confession, give them your love, and give them your blessing. Who will give it back if we don't do it? It's just us. We are the ones. I look at that, I think, who can give you the moments back cradling your sick child at home? Or keeping your sick child in the car seat next to you in a minivan, for heaven's sake. We've got pictures over here on the storyboard that we're going to bring to Speaker Dowd. And there's a picture on one end of a father who's on the day to bring home his child wasn't able to do it. His workplace did not allow it. Can you imagine? When do you get that day again? You don't get it. These are the moments that shape us, and these are the moments that give us heart. And we say that we're all about family. Right. But I'm sorry, work is far too important for you to be there at the most precious moments of your family. What have we done? You know, what have we done to each other? It just isn't right. And for the fact that this hasn't gotten a hearing, Speaker Dowd's leadership, we need that leadership. We don't just need a passive look at it or a nod or a wink or a deal. We need to take care of our families. They deserve it, absolutely. We've got a letter to deliver up to Speaker Dowd, and it is a request for his and mapping out his leadership that we are asking for. And so we're asking for open hearts, we're asking for action, we're asking for leadership, we're asking to bring the power of that position to bear on the deepest needs of the people of Minnesota. We need it, absolutely. Yeah. Right. We have so many stories, and we have stories to bring that are symbolic. We'll bring that storyboard up to Speaker Dowd's office and present it. We also will possibly pray with them there. We plan on doing that. Pastors, leaders, and those of you who are around here, we want to gather and be able to take that in. Basically, and if pastors that you're already gathered up here, leaders of each of this coalition, if you would also join us in the midst of that. So, Alexa.
Thank you, Pastor Matt. All right. So for those of you who are staying here, we're going to send a delegation upstairs, and I would call on everyone to stay here because they will come back and tell us what happened. But I'd like to send them off with a chant for Speaker Dowd to hear us now. All right? Hear us now. 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 Hear us now.
Let's go. Let's go. We're gonna live stream it.
Sure. Maybe you want to wait for...
Yeah, let's wait for him.
All right, we're going to go up to Speaker Dowd's office now. Pastor Matt is going to deliver the letter, we expect that just like he wasn't willing to come meet us and hear our stories at the rally, he won't meet us now. So if his aide is there, then Pastor Matt will deliver a letter and share, we'll deliver the photos of our families, and then we'll pray for them and try to send a message to him about what's at stake for us.
Where's the room number?
463.
Stairs or elevator?
Stairs if you can. Yeah.
Thank you. 2 years ago, is that right? And I'll just listen.
A pretty important mission.
Spread the word.
That seems irresistible. Yeah, those guys. Yeah. Let's see what I thought. So we can start here all night. Hi, Jason. How are you? Yeah. These are not the good sides. I don't see how you